According to Pro Football Focus, Auburn could have the best wide receiver room in the country next year. Welcome on into the Auburn Express, powered by the War Report. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for making us one of your first listens of the day. Joining me is my good friend Kyle Rush from the Barn. Kyle, PFF says Auburn is the only school with a top 10 duo, according to their metrics, in college football. That's Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton Jr. We all know about Eric and Singleton Jr. transferring from Georgia Tech to Auburn. And Cam Coleman, one of the most electrifying freshmen in the country last year. He was dynamite, but he returns as well too. They'll be catching balls from Jackson Arnold, presumably, and this makes Auburn formidable. Now we all know receiving has been kind of a bugaboo for fans over the last couple of years. I think they started to solve that puzzle last year with Keandre Lambert Smith. Can Eric Singleton step in and be the Keandre Lambert Smith that they need this year?
You hope so. I mean, these type accolades definitely help your faith in that. I mean, having the number 5 and the number 6 overall ranked wide receiver going into the 2025 year, only team that has it. I think that should be get you pretty excited. I mean, this is kind of what you expected from Freeze, though. This is kind of what you expected as far as what his wide receiver room is going to look like. That's what he did at Ole Miss, and now, at least on paper, last year you kind of started to see it emerge a little bit, and maybe this year it can take an even bigger step forward, which is kind of scary considering the production that you got out of freshman Cam Coleman, and then obviously Keandre Lambert Smith too.
Yeah, absolutely. Cam Coleman is the other side of that coin, the most electrifying freshman. I don't know if you like that Ryan Williams guy. He's all right.
Jeremiah
Uh,
Smith is pretty good too.
yeah, I heard Ryan Williams was the youngest 17-year-old to ever turn 18 recently.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yeah.
however, you've got Cam Coleman coming back, and Auburn has to find a way to increase targets and receptions. Over the last couple of years, Kyle, the top receivers in the conference are around 80 plus receptions on the year. That sounds crazy. Auburn's most receptions last year was Keandre Lambert Smith. I believe he had 50 receptions on the season. Can you imagine one of these two with 30 more receptions than what Keandre Lambert Smith had last year?
That's crazy, especially with the way offenses are. I'm looking at the stats right now, and it looks like Andrew Armstrong last year, this is through in the Southeastern Conference, had 78 catches for 1,100 yards. And then Kevin Coleman Jr. had 74 catches. I would have thought Trey Harris would have had a bunch of receptions, but he just had a lot of yards per catch. So yeah, they got to get the targets. You just mentioned Keandre Lambert Smith. He came in with 50-ish receptions,
Yep.
I think.
Hmm.
So definitely got to get the receptions up if you're going to keep these mouths full, keep these guys happy. So you
Yeah.
got two studs, hey, and you got some not so scrappy or not so bad receivers right behind them too, Malcolm Simmons, and then Perry Thompson, Horatio Fields. Got a lot of mouths to feed.
You do. Interesting stat. Eric Singleton's 1,468 receiving yards, Kyle, across the last 2 years are the second most among returning power forward wideouts. He also scored above the 99th percentile in Pro Football Focus's game athleticism score metric.
Let me tell you what.
Now,
When I look for an effect, when I look at great receivers, I always go to PFF's whatever stat you just read that they just made up. That's the one I go to as far as knowing that
right,
a
right,
receiver is great.
right. Yeah, it sounds like a video game metric that PFF made up there. But hey, listen, we hope that they put up video game numbers. Keandre Lambert Smith last year came up just short of being Auburn's first 1,000-yard receiver since Ronnie Daniels in 1999. Sammy Coates got close, Darvin Adams got close, but have been unable to break that 1,000-yard barrier. Could Eric Singleton or Cam Coleman be one of these guys that reaches that 1,000-yard mark this year in Hugh Freeze's offense?
I'm wondering almost if they'll cannibalize each other. Like I wonder if it's gonna if that could
Hmm.
possibly hurt the chances of get like could you have instead of having 1,000-yard receiver, could you have two like 850 or two 900-yard receivers? That would be pretty. I don't know that I'd be upset about that. It's pretty. I think it's pretty rare to have two guys go over 1,000 yards. But I mean, look, like we talked about Keandre Lambert-Smith, you're talking about 50 catches for 981 yards, like almost 20 yards a catch. I mean, I think Eric Singleton can be just as effective and have that same explosion. He be that same type of explosive player. But to go over 1,000 yards, I almost wonder if they'll kind of cannibalize each other a little bit. How many times have we seen 2,000-yard receivers? I mean, these guys are both going to demand a lot of targets. I don't want to say demand.
Yeah.
They should get a lot of targets.
Yeah. So that brings us back to the question of volume.
Yeah.
Can Hugh Freeze get Jackson Arnold closer to what his quarterbacks normally average, which is 400 attempts a season, 400 or more attempts a season? Auburn has come up well short of that mark over the last 2 years. They've struggled to get the ball in the air at times. They only 200 and I think it was 30 receptions in the regular season for Peyton Thorne in year one. They got over the 300 mark in year two. Do you see the volume increasing? There was a big complaint that people felt you weren't getting the ball to Jarquez Hunter enough last year. So the balance between run and pass is something that Auburn's got to solve if you want to get these guys the types of receptions that can get them to 1,000 yards.
I think last year the struggle was we couldn't really decide what we were struggling between identity and then what we wanted our identity to be. I guess if that like we probably were a little bit more of a successful running team than we were a passing team, but we wanted to pass the ball more because that's what Hugh Freeze wants. That's Hugh Freeze. That's the way he's always done. He's always, like you just said, he's always had over a ton of completions, a ton of yards passing, ton of yards receiving every single year. So when you go into this year, I'm just wondering if that the identity of the team, the makeup of the offensive roster is starting to look more like what Hugh wants. And then, hey, you got to get first downs. When you get first downs, you can get more plays. And when you can get more plays, you can get more reception. So as things go, I think as we continue down this road and continue down this roster building situation that we're in, I think that's going to end up yielding. If you can get any momentum offensive on the offensive side at all, I think it will yield more receptions and more passing yards because that's what Hugh wants to do.
Yeah. Look, lost in this discussion sometimes is the fact that on offense, when you're playing from behind, you tend to have to abandon the run
Yeah.
and throw the ball a lot down the stretch. We've seen that with Auburn over the last couple of years. So hopefully, if they're not playing from behind, you'll see a better balance at the end of games between run and pass, and hopefully a higher volume because you're running more plays and keeping your defense off the field. DJ Durkin just got a huge contract, and that's because his defense was able to produce despite Auburn sometimes not being able to hold on to the ball offensively. So we'll see how it goes. I like this wide receiver room. I think Cam Coleman and Eric Singleton aren't the only guys that opposing defenses are going to have to worry about there, Kyle. But look, spring is on the way. Spring ball is on the way for football, but basketball is here right now. We're going to talk about Auburn basketball right after a quick word from our friends at the Rogue Shop. If you were worried on Saturday that the Auburn Tigers were going to lose to Alabama in Tuscaloosa, the Rogue Shop could have helped kept you calm. The Tigers pulled it out in what was a thrilling game, probably the best game in conference history between the first number one and number twos in conference history matching up there in Tuscaloosa. Visit rogueshop.com. Use code REPORTER to get 15% off that Rogue Shop order. Also, this episode is brought to you by our friends at Golden's Cast Iron. Visit goldenscastiron.com/WR. Use code Get Your Weight Up for 15% off your weights and code TWR for $65 off fire pits and Kamado grills. Spring is here. Golden's Cast Iron has got you covered. So if you want to go tailgate for the 8A game, take your Golden's Cast Iron grill out there and make sure that you're eating well while you watch the Tigers this spring. Kyle, basketball is upon us, and the Auburn Tigers are still number one for the 6th week straight after taking down Alabama in Tuscaloosa in a game where they never trailed on Alabama's floor.
Feels good.
An incredible game. They had an answer for every single run that Alabama had. Quite honestly, is this the best Auburn team in Auburn history on the basketball court?
I mean, it's if they keep winning, they have an argument to be the best team like in the history of college basketball,
Oh,
based off
okay.
of the strength of schedule, all the metrics that go along with that. One of the highest Ken Palm ratings in the history of Ken Palm. It's going to be hard to if they were to somehow continue this streak and end up capping it with a national championship, you legitimately have a real talk of them being the best college basketball team ever. So for sure, I think you got up to this point in the season, without a doubt, the best Auburn basketball team of all time in the best conference of all time, not just the best Southeastern Conference of all time, but the best conference of all time for a particular season in basketball. It's remarkable, man. When you look at it's like ranked win after ranked win, quad one win after quad one win. You go to Alabama, the number 2 team, ranked team in the country, they've embarrassed some people. They've beaten the crap out of some teams, and Auburn controlled the game from the tip and never let them up, and I loved every minute of it.
Yeah, yeah. Look, um, if you're Auburn, you're already in rarefied, territory. You've accomplished so much on the court that it's crazy. At this point, you can't even question what they've accomplished at this point because who's done better?
Yeah,
Right. I said
exactly.
this, I was arguing with a Bama fan in our comment section about the game, and pretty much I'm saying, look, uh, yeah, they lost to Florida, but who's got a better loss than Auburn right now? You
Yeah,
could argue that Alabama losing to Auburn might be a better loss than Auburn losing to Florida. But either
yeah,
way, Auburn's involved. Auburn is a part of that equation, Kyle. I just
exactly.
don't think at this point anybody has a better resume. I think they should have a 1 game cushion to lose another one and sit on that number 1 perch.
Yeah, I agree. I agree as well. Florida's going to be tough because Florida's hot right now and they're playing good and they have the head to head. Now,
Yeah.
you look at Auburn's 2 losses on the year and it's Duke on the road, which is like they're a top 4 team. And then obviously Florida, who's, I guess, number 2 right now in the AP poll. So, other than that, obviously they won every other game and they've won against a bunch of ranked teams, including number 2 team in the country. Look, I saw somebody say that, and I haven't confirmed this yet, but it's probably true. Auburn spent more weeks in the as an AP number 1 in basketball than they have in football, which is kind of crazy to think about. And yeah,
Wow.
that's pretty crazy to think about.
Actually,
And
wild.
then
Yeah.
only 2 wins away I've seen from clinching a number 1 overall seed. That's if they go 2-4 for the rest of the season, which is not the number.
Okay.
I'm sorry, not the number 1 overall seed, but a number 1 seed, one of the top
Okay.
4
Got it.
seeds, just
Okay.
based
Got it.
off of the resume that they've built. So, man, they're doing some crazy things. And if you really think about it, like how many true NBA players are really on this roster? Like you're doing it with a lot of guys that are. I mean, I'm not saying we're a bunch of scrubs, like a lot of teams or a lot of media like to make us out to be, but man, Bruce is getting every bit out of this team. Like he is
He,
if you're a transfer portal guy and you're worried about development, holy cow, look at what he's
yeah.
starting to
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, I don't think development should be a question that you have a if you're a recruit. By the way, but look, as we are recording this, Auburn tips off against Arkansas in Neville. I'm tucked away nicely in Neville Arena right now. But your remaining schedule is Arkansas and Georgia at home, and then you go on the road for. I'm sorry, then
You
you
get
have
Ole
Ole
Miss
Miss
at
at
home too.
home.
Yeah, you get
Yeah.
Ole Miss at home.
Um, then you get Kentucky at Rupp, and you get Texas A&M on the road, another top 10 matchup, and then you finish the season against Alabama. Alabama could be right back at number 2 by the time of this next matchup. Honestly, it would be crazy to see these 2 teams play twice at 1 and 2 in the country. But hey, look, that's how good the SEC is this year. Before we get out of here, I do want to talk about this last schedule. You mentioned if you finish 4-2 over this last 6 game stretch, you solidify a number 1 seed. But to get that number one overall seed, Kyle, in your mind, what does Auburn have to do? Do they have to win out?
No,
Is there a loss cushion in there
I
to
think it's
lose
two.
one
I
and still
think
be?
every expert that I've listened to thinks there's two losses. There's two losses before there's even a conversation
Does it
about
matter who the two losses are, though?
that. Now that's a good question. Now that's a good question. If you somehow get upset by Arkansas, or if you drop one to Georgia, and then if you lose if your two losses are out of these home games, but then again, then you would go on the road and beat Kentucky and Texas A&M. I don't think it matters. I really don't. I don't think it matters.
Okay.
I think you got two losses before there's even a conversation about should Auburn drop off of the number one overall seed. But Mike, that ain't gonna happen. That ain't gonna happen. We ain't gonna have that conversation. We ain't gonna have that conversation.
Lots of bug on the plains this year. Look, a fascinating conversation about Auburn basketball. We will be in Nashville for the SEC tournament, Kyle, covering every second of that. And wherever the first round is, hopefully not Seattle.
Yeah, we want
Auburn
Lexington.
is looking, yeah, looking at Rupp Arena or Raleigh, North Carolina. We know the Sweet 16 is in Atlanta, and then the Final Four, of course, is in San Antonio. War Report and the Barn will be there with you for all of it. Before we get out of here, man, tell people where they can find you.
Absolutely. You go to thebarnauburn.com, sign up $25 off your annual membership, and then you can go to the Barn Auburn YouTube page, and we have tons of shows there, tons of content breaking down baseball. Got some of the best baseball coverage maybe out there. But
There you go.
overall, anywhere you can get a podcast, you can find us.
That's it for another great edition of the Auburn Express, powered by the War Report. If you want more content like this, please hit like and subscribe. We are the War Report on every social media platform. TW Report on TikTok. We're signing off, and as always, War Eagle.